Tell us about where we are on getting the world vaccinated. I know you have a plan. I think it's $49 billion required to get 70% of the people around the world vaccinated by the end of 2022. Where are we on that plan?
Well, we're doing fairly well in wealthy countries, David, and it's great to be with you again. But it's just as your piece indicated. You know, Africa has a total population of above 1.3 million people. Just over 1% are vaccinated. India, another 1.3 billion people. 5.1 to 7% vaccination rates. Latin America, maybe, twice that, but still quite low across a population of almost 800 million. So the reality is there are billions of people in lower income countries that are quickly becoming a huge reservoir for viral replication. And as now we see the Delta variant is the dominant variant in so many places around the world, that is just going to keep replicating and keep threatening the precarious gains we've already made, and could undermine this global economic recovery and could cause a new wave of death and lockdown in wealthy places that think COVID is over or is behind us to some great extent.
Raj, where are you on the $50 billion? 49, just to be precise, $49 billion, because we've been talking about this for a while now. You've had that plan out there. We now, for example, have, as I understand the IMF, moving forward with I think it's $650 billion in issuance of new special drawing rights. Will that help take care of the problem?
Well, yes and no. As you point out, the Rockefeller Foundation pulled together experts from around the world and estimated about 49 billion would get a 70% herd immunity vaccination rate in the 92 low-income countries, poorest countries in the world. And, that would save the world economy $9 trillion in losses if we don't do it. So it's an incredibly good ROI investment. The IMF has made important steps forward, but they still have, probably 4 to 6 months before those resources start to hit and improve vaccination on the ground in those countries. And there's some complex steps that still need to happen. The G20 finance ministers are meeting right now in Venice and have a unique opportunity to take the shackles off of the multilateral development banks, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and give them the capacity to greatly expand rapidly their lending to low-income countries. Yesterday, the Rockefeller Foundation put out a report illustrating how to do that by changing the capital adequacy requirements of those institutions to put potentially $700 billion to $1 trillion of lending into lower income countries that are going to be the front lines of the global defense against COVID-19 and the global aspiration to have an equitable recovery.
Yeah, and Raj, I want to make a distinction if it's the correct one. I think it is. On the one hand, we have to get everybody vaccinated, get up to that 70% number worldwide. We also have to help these countries restore their economies. And that's somewhat separate from that. And you do have a plan with the multilateral development banks. As I understand it, maybe freeing up as much as $1 trillion for investment?
That's exactly right. These banks were created after World War II in the famous Bretton Woods Agreement. They were created to help much of the emerging and developing world achieve some degree of economic convergence, catch up growth with wealthy countries on the basic idea that stability, growth, economic activity, and opportunity for everyone is deeply stabilizing for the global economy. Simple concept. The reality is they've been deeply constrained through this crisis. We illustrate how, if you look at 2019 versus 2020, multilateral development lending to low-income countries has not increased their rate of growth on an annual basis and stayed around 6% growth, whereas during the global financial crisis, it was much, much higher than that. This is a global financial crisis for the emerging world, and both because resources are needed to vaccinate everybody and because you need big fiscal expenditures, as you see in wealthy countries, to recover. And neither of those things are happening right now. And so we call for bold action right now from the G20 finance ministers in Venice.
And Raj, just a final point here. As I understand your proposal is you might try to kill two birds with one stone. That is to say, in a lot of this lending in these middle and lower income countries, you would actually put it toward climate change investment.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, never waste a crisis. And the reality is, if we want all of the world's economies and not just a handful to join a climate agreement at around 1.5 degrees Celsius, building on what the Biden administration has put out there, there has to be some pathway where countries believe they get resources to invest in lifting up the living standards of their people and do it in a green, renewable, clean manner. And this is that opportunity. We see green recoveries being a big component of the EU plan. We know it's a big part of the Biden bipartisan infrastructure bill in the United States. It should be a part of the package that's offered to the 92 poorest countries in the world. And just like after World War II, the ministers came together and said, let's create the basis for dealing with the future challenges the world faces. That's what the opportunity the G20 finance ministers have right now, and I very much hope they'll act.
Rod, just briefly here at the end, I always ask the same question, when? What's the timeline? How fast could you get that money out?
Well, both the IMF action and the action around the multilateral development banks would have to be agreed to by finance ministers now, approved in board meetings this fall, and probably really start to disperse aggressively in Q1 onward of next year. And that's probably in the current system about as fast as you can go in order to do something bold and transformational. We did not see these kinds of leadership actions happen a year ago. And as a result, in 2020, we don't see huge new funds flowing from wealthy countries and the community nations to the 92 lower income countries. It's urgent that we not repeat that mistake that was made, and we act boldly now so that 6 months, 9 months, 12 months from now, we're in a whole different environment.